Alohe na omakua, alohe na kiniakua pauloe, aloha hoi e na kino lauakua, na ia o ka moana, na kanu o ka aina, na holoholona, a me na manu o ka lewae, alohe na li, mai Hawai'i moku o ke awe a I hawa ka helelani e. Alohe nā kupuna, alohe nā mākua, alohe ka lehulehu. Aloha e. Aloha mai kākou. O hau ku Kahakalau, ke ke alopaka Kahakalau, ke kia uyama, kia hunui Kahakalau, ke kia Daniela ki kino Kahakalau, a me ke ao o pele. Mai o ahu kākui hewa, mai mono ka inui a hina, maui a kama ha me Hawai'i, o ko ke awe o hana Hawai'i, a mai ke lemania mai ka, o hana ko mama, aloha mai kākou. My name is Auntie Koo, and I am the moderator today, and I'm really excited that you folks are here to join us for this forum on linking indigenous knowledge, sovereignty, emerging technologies, and conservation. And we have a wonderful panel with us today, and after that panel discussion we will break into groups based on the interests that you have according to what our presenters shared with you, and then we'll just have a little sharing at the end of our very short 1 hour. Little background for me. I was born in Honolulu, but I live in Kanohokuahiwi now, right above Waipio Valley, and I've been an educator since 1985, looking at how can we teach our Hawaiian children to be 21st century Hawaiians. And it's really been a wondrous journey. As part of this journey, I was the first person to get a PhD in indigenous education, and basically what I learned in that process was that ancient is modern, that traditional is contemporary, and that the ways of our kupuna still work perfectly today. We don't need to invent nothing new. If we look at our oli, if we look at our mo'olelo, if we look at our mo'oku'auhau, if we look at our olelo no eau, everything we need to know is already there. We don't need to be making no changes to the kalo, or to the ama, or to any of our other poe kanu. These are poe kanu. This means plant people. Okay? So we don't have it, the plant. We have she or he, or a human quality, a real mana kind of a quality. And so, as Hawaiians, it's very, very clear to us that changing us and changing our plant families is not an option. It's not something that we are willing to negotiate. It's not something that we are willing to live with. When we look at our cosmogonic genealogies, it starts with Papa and Wakea, and they give birth to the islands. And then Papa gives birth to Ho'ohukalani, who gives birth to Ha'aloha Nakalau Kapalili, the first Kalo, and her second child is Ha'aloha, the first Hawaiian. So to us, according to our cosmogonic genealogies, Ha'aloha Nakalau Kapalili is our older brother. And just like you would not want your older brother to get raped, the same way we don't want Ha'aloha Nakalau Kapalili to be injected with stuff, whatever it may be, other genes, other, molecules, obviously, whatever it is that they're going to put in and forcefully inject it, because we don't believe in rape. We love sex, and we're good with any time, anywhere, with who, when, why, and all of that, because that was the way of our kupuna. We do have a lot of couples of eating, but none of sex, at least traditionally. So it's not about that. It's about not consenting to this kind of intrusion, to this kind of invasion. And so for us, that's how I got involved in the GMO, anti-GMO movement, was basically when they talked about that they were going to genetically modify kalo. And as Hawaiian grassroots practitioners, as people who plant kalo, who have raised our children as kalo kanu o ka aina. Kalo kanu o ka aina. Taro planted on the land. That's what we are called, the natives of the land from generations back. We refer to ourselves, in the words of our puna, as kalo kanu o ka aina, taro planted on the land. And we are not, at this point in time, or ever, going to consent to modification of us or our older brother Halo Kahakalau Kapilili. And the same goes for plants like Ama. Ama is a kinolau of the god Kani. Kani, the creator. Kani, the god of fresh water. Kani, the god of sunlight. Kani, the god who provides everything that we need to survive on this land. And so to think about modifying Ama so that all of a sudden, instead of it growing on our land, it's going to be made in some laboratory, that is also not an option for us. It's not something that we are going to entertain now or ever. We are currently, I started a school called Kanu o ka aina, Plants of the Land, because we wanted to be a little bit more inclusive and not only strictly for Hawaiians, but it was a school that was focusing on perpetuating things Hawaiian. And now we're moving in, and as part of that movement, we learned about education with aloha. Short, EA. EA also means sovereignty, and we are creating EA Ecoversity now. And it brings together our indigenous knowledge. It brings together the whole concept of sovereignty, hence EA Ecoversity, as well as emerging technologies in that we have badges and we do digital portfolios. Our Aloha Aina piece is every student has to be part of a land internship in a land stewardship kind of a program. And as far as Malama, taking care of our land, not just talking about it, but really making it a way of life. And so we are very excited that the future for Hawaiians is not going to be within these systems that have never, ever looked out for our better interests. They've always only looked out for their better interests. And so we are creating our systems, our way, using our traditional knowledge to move forward, not as an anti-somebody else, but a pro-Hawaiian movement. And really this is what this is all about. This is not anti-anybody else. This is a movement as recreating and revitalizing and restoring our indigenous knowledge and becoming sovereign again. Not like we were never sovereign, just becoming sovereign again and taking our rightful place as 21st century Hawaiians in this community of people throughout the world that want to also take care of the land, that also want to manage our resources and conserve the things that we have for future generations. Mahalo.
Glad to be back in Hawaii. Many years ago, I spent time as a graduate student at UH. Working in biogeography, mostly fisheries then. This week we've been talking about in a number of meetings here, you know, how do we save endangered Hawaii? You know, the first concept we need to embrace is, I think the Hawaiian word is malama, caretaking. We drafted with some of our friends principles for the oversight of synthetic biology, which is what the new genetic engineers are calling what they're doing. And the first principle in, you know, an English way of thinking, we call it the precautionary principle. That is the same as malama. It means the first thing you do is care for all of the creation. The second thing you do when you have a new technology is figure out how to protect it from, you know, protect the use of this in the environment. We call that regulation. It's a dirty word in Washington now, but you need to be able to figure out how to regulate it. Now there are now 4 ways of engineering mosquitoes, and only 2 of them are regulated. Sterile insect technique, any of you from the Big Island or any of you involved in coffee production, for a long time in Hawaii, irradiating medflies has been used to control the medfly population in coffee groves. It's an important thing. That's a regulated technology, generally run by the state. It's got some problems when they use it in mosquitoes. Turns out the female mosquito doesn't really like the smell of the irradiated, doesn't like the smell of the irradiated one as well. So in a number of places, including here at UH and at around the world, in Australia and in the University of Kentucky, people are infecting mosquitoes with a kind of bacteria. You've got it here. It's in the fruit fly. It's in your geckos. It's a common bacteria. When you put one kind of bacteria into the male and another kind of this bacteria into the female, the eggs are sterile. The Environmental Protection Agency regulates this as a biopesticide. So there's already a regulatory way of doing this. When you genetically engineer an insect, until just recently, the Food and Drug Administration says this is a new animal drug. We go, what? It's an insect that you've engineered. It's not a drug. And so we've been having arguments with them, and they do really bad environmental reviews. So our organization and others have sued them, and they withdrew the first application of a genetically engineered insect. Came from a company called Oxitec, because the community was opposed to it, and we and other groups sued them for doing a really bad environmental review. So right now, the Food and Drug Administration is reconsidering how to do that. There's another kind of genetic engineering called gene editing. That's a really fast way of doing genetic engineering, and one of the things it can do is genetically engineer an organism so it trumps evolution, so that instead of getting a recessive and a dominant trait, you can use gene editing to introduce ways to actually kill off the whole species. The National Academy of Science says we don't know enough to release an organism that would wipe out the entire species, even if it's an invasive species, and ask researchers to not release these, at least for now, until we understand them a lot better. There's a lot of work to be done. Our organization is going to be focusing to make sure that particularly with the genetically engineered ones and the gene-drive ones, that they're well regulated, that they don't harm workers, that they don't harm wildlife, that they don't harm the community, and that there's community participation in making decisions about all of these. And thank you. Mahalo. I think somewhere we have copies of these principles for the oversight of synthetic biology in the back, all the way before you go out. Thank you.
My name is Dana Perls. I am with an environmental nonprofit called Friends of the Earth, which is based in Washington, D.C., and I am personally based in Berkeley, California. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. So Jaydee spoke about the applications of a new type of genetic engineering called synthetic biology to conservation. We hear a lot of the use of the GMO mosquito from Oxitec, the potential gene drive mosquito, which is an extinction technology being researched right now. But I'm going to talk about a different application of these genetic engineering technologies, and that is to agriculture. Synthetic biology synthetic biology is a type of genetic engineering. It's kind of the evolution of genetic engineering. And it's part of a much bigger platform than just agriculture and even conservation. It's being looked at for use in bioweapons, pharmaceuticals, industrial chemicals, in conservation, and big agriculture. And so while there is a lot of talk about more appealing applications, such as saving endangered species, where most of the money is going is into the Department of Defense under DARPA and companies like Monsanto and DuPont. And so I want to talk about those applications, which are the ones that are most likely going to be very prominent and are actually already on the market right now. So right now we're seeing these new genetic engineered ingredients entering in the form of stevia, saffron, vanilla, ginseng, coconut oil, shea butter. Really the list goes on. We've figured out how to engineer tiny microorganisms such as yeast or algae and use them as microfactories to pump out whatever we've designed them to pump out, and then stick a label on them and call them natural and sustainable. There are products that are silencing genes, deleting genes, adding genes. And so I want to talk about that, because we're not just talking about synthetic biology for addressing mosquitoes and honey creeper birds, but actually this is about a very profit-driven industry that's looking to design, patent, and profit from DNA, the very building blocks of our life. Synthetic biologists draw from a variety of approaches. As I said, they can create DNA from scratch. You can reprogram life forms, silence genes, delete genes. One example that is very common now for the ingredients that are entering into the market is almost like a word processor, where you have a computer and you can type out a sentence, which is your DNA sequence, print it out, insert it into a microorganism such as yeast, ferment it with GMO corn or sugar, in some cases escaped gas from fracking, and then out comes whatever you've just designed it. So for example, vanillin. This is about engineering an entire process, not just the final product. And so there are a lot of risks and concerns that are both continuing from GMOs and also that are unique to these new genetic engineering techniques. First of all, the way that these organisms will interact with the environment are unpredictable and could be potentially devastating for the environment with ripple effects. We're hearing the same stories about the potential benefits. This is going to save the world by feeding a growing population. This is going to reverse climate change. This is going to help small farmers. When actually it keeps us on the same pesticide treadmill, privatizes nature, and what we're seeing is that it robs livelihoods of farmers from around the world. So there's a lot of concerns, but I'm going to name just 3 of them for now. One is contamination. GE yeast and algae, which is commonly used in these ingredients in the market, are some of the most common organisms on this planet. And we know that they are not 100% containable. Once in the environment, these GE organisms will spread and could cause irreversible effects. Techniques like gene drives, which is what Jaydee mentioned, may drive a species into extinction or drive diverse traits out of a population. Where this could happen in agriculture could be extremely problematic. Let's say I design a gene drive seed, pigweed, or I design a gene drive pigweed, which is a very problematic weed in agriculture, and I've designed it to be more susceptible to whatever my pesticide is. And pigweed, which is a close sister of amaranth, could cross-pollinate together. And now you have farmers in Bolivia that all of a sudden are seeing that they need to use pesticides with their crops. So contamination is a big problem. It's not sustainable, that's number 2. These organisms depend on feedstocks to grow, such as GMO corn and sugar, which we know are very chemical intensive, water intensive, and have a lot of problems with the environment. And so if we need to create more space on this planet to grow corn or sugarcane, to feed the yeast, to create the vanillin, we need to look at what's actually sustainable, and we need to look at that holistically. Thirdly, I'm going to speed up because I just got my sign, less time. It hurts farmers. Most of the products that are hitting the market are plant replacements. So Symbia, stevia, Symbio, saffron, ginseng, ginger, vanillin. There's research into ava. So we're looking at high-value crops that provide livelihoods for more than 100 million farmers around the world. And if you replace those livelihoods with these symbio ingredients and call them natural, again, I want to ask, who is this actually sustainable for? Is it sustainable to replace the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people? So what does this look like on the market? Flavors, fragrances, oils, medicinal plants, seeds, and pesticides. So I've listed a number of them already, and it's also entering into cosmetics. We're seeing rose oil, cumin, patchouli, squalene, and medicinal plants such as Japanese knotwood, menthol, ginseng, hemp, opiates, artemisinin. And as was mentioned, there's research into ava coming out of a lab in Canada. So really the question that we bring up here is the same question we've heard before, which is who is deciding for Hawaii? Who is deciding the future of our food system when this is marketed as natural, when it's marketed as sustainable? Who is that actually for? We're looking at CRISPR, which is a type of gene editing in agriculture that's gotten a lot of attention for being drought tolerant and disease tolerant, when actually this is just the next GMO. DuPont has a type of this gene edited corn that was just recently approved called DuPont waxy corn. And these gene edited corn and seeds will contaminate. There are, I don't have time to go into the environmental problems, but there's much more concern about these gene-edited seeds than the traditional GMOs. Big ag and biotech companies like Monsanto are also trying to engineer new types of pesticides, which could be a problem for a place like Hawaii, where a lot of these are tested. They just had a product get approved called BioDirect, and that is a DNA spray. So that brings up a whole different set of concerns about what happens when you have pesticide drift of tiny sequences of RNA, and it's an RNA interference. What happens when that enters into your bloodstream, and what are the health impacts? These are not research questions that are funded. These are not assessments that are being done. And so I name these problems because it's important to look at how these applications are being applied. It's important that when we say, well, we want this application over here, but where else is it actually going to be used? And where is the money going to be? Where is the profit going to be made? And what is actually the food system that we want to see? This takes us in the opposite direction of an agroecological food system, one that's sustainable, one that supports livelihoods, and one that's going to be healthy for people and the environment. And really, we're at a crossroads right now where we have the power to choose. Which direction do we want to go? What does the community say? What conversations are we demanding to be part of? And what's the solution that's best for people as opposed to the companies that stand to profit? So there are a number of resources in the back of the room, including a shopper's guide to Symbio. I do want to say that in order to avoid these ingredients on the market, there are a couple of certifications, non-GMO project verified and USDA organic. If you just see a natural label, I would suggest staying away or do more research. But really there's a lot of information in the back, and I would just say that we're at a moment right now where we can choose to go in one direction or another. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share.
Ano'i aloha, o wau o Kelsea Kanohokuahiwi Hosoda, o olo mana ku mauna, o kaele pulu ku aina, ua mai, o baila. I am not the person who's inside your schedule. That's Nurse's fees. I'm standing in for her, but she's a wonderful person as well, a great graduate student. I wear multiple hats. First of all, I'm a mother. I take care of my ohana. I also am a PhD student up at the university looking at the intersect of computer science and Olelo Hawaii and making a model so that we can get our ike kupuna for the next generations. I'm also an educator in Waimana at Malamohono Public Charter School, where I do Olelo Hawaii and science. And that is where it's really at. Who decides? We are the ones that decide. And those keiki are the ones, the next generation. My past life, at least for my master's, was in molecular biosciences and biological engineering. What does that mean? I can do those gene knockdowns. I've done them in the lab, but it was within a different context, for cancer. The research that I did, I looked at taking out all of these different genes so that cancer doesn't metastasize. I didn't think twice about it. But really, that technology, depending on who's got it in their hands, could go a very different perspective. So now we're at this crossroads, like everybody has been saying up here, on who decides. I don't have the answers. I'm just a haumana in this world, just still learning, as we all are. We don't know what's real and what's fake anymore. All these labels, you can label it like you want, but really, at the end of the day, who knows? So, who knows? How do we decide? That is why I'm up here. So this Hawaiian perspective, what I come from is that Hawaiian culture is science. That is my platform wherever I go. And how is it different than modern science? The key, well, I guess I should explain. So there's Kanaka, man. There's Akua, God, deities, spiritual realm, and aina. How many of you guys are aloha aina practitioners? Raise your hand. Yeah, I see a lot of wonderful people out there. How about, so how is it different? Kanaka. Modern science is all about Kanaka. It's what is right there at that moment. Whether it's a disease, malaria, whether it's cancer, you want to take that out right away. But you don't look at the ramifications down the line. Within the aina and akua realms, if you have that balance, you'll realize that if you take out malaria, if you take out a disease, there might be something else coming. If you look to the mo'olelo or the stories, you'll find that information there. And in many indigenous cultures, you'll see that there was this balance between those three entities: man, spiritual realm, and land. What gets in the way of America within this modern time is money, capitalism. With my keiki, I was so hesitant to be on this panel. I asked them, I was like, okay, we're driving down the road in our 15-passenger van, and I said, okay, guys in the front row, you guys are pro-gene drive. Guys in the back row, you guys are anti-gene drive. We're gonna have a debate. Long story short, what it came out was, the kid said, there's not enough facts, Kumu. And I said, yeah, there isn't. So what should we do about it? And they said, we need to learn the facts. The key thing of Hawaiian perspective, whether you're looking at it from the Makawamu perspective, is that you're able to zoom in so closely into the elements, the natural phenomena, whether it's the clouds or the movement of the cellular items within the cells. And then you're also able to zoom out and look at the social, economic, and cultural impacts. What are those social, economic, and cultural impacts? That is not what the science of today looks at. And that is how we have to look at it for who decides. There are documents in the back. There's the Pauokalani Declaration. If you've ever worked with me, if you've ever had me as a teacher, if you ever talked with me, I'm harsh. I'm a critic. I will criticize your mana'o because out of aloha, because I want it to be better. I do not settle for mediocrity. It gets me into trouble, choke. But I'm trying to push the next generation. Don't settle for mediocrity. Although I pushed that document Pauokalani, it's a start. It's not perfect. Last night, me and my husband were going through it with a red marker. You don't want that. But it's a start, and we need to iterate on it. So in this time, in this space, let's figure out who decides. Hawaii is doing some amazing things, whether we're trying to sue the federal government in multiple different avenues. Maybe what comes out of this can be put on a national stage, international. But first, let's start at home and figure out who decides, because these technologies are coming. We need to figure that out before it's too late. Our keiki are coming up, and they have this mindset, but we need to meet them from the top so that it's quicker. Mahalo nui a opo pakahi a pau.